Toward the end of the 5th century after Christ, the Roman Empire had already been in a gradual process of decline for a long time. This led to the collapse of its western half under the weight of civil wars and internal struggles for power. These conflicts, in turn, made it vulnerable to attacks from external enemies, and in many places imperial territory simply slipped out of the effective control of Roman authority. But while Rome was falling in the west, the empire remained stable in the east. There stood the new center of the Roman world, from which its name and its legacy would continue for another millennium. The reign of Zeno, the man with the doubtful distinction of being the first Roman emperor to rule the eastern part of the empire as the only center of Roman power, was Zeno. He came to power at the beginning of the year 474 after Christ, after the death of his 7-year-old son, Leo II. The child had briefly inherited the throne from Emperor Leo I, but shortly afterward he died from illness. From the beginning of his rule, Zeno was troubled by internal struggles among his commanders and had to remain constantly alert for possible rivals. At the same time that Romulus Augustulus was being deposed in the west by the Germanic leader Odoacer, Zeno himself was also overthrown during a civil war by the usurper Basiliscus. This happened in the year 475 after Christ. Basiliscus ruled briefly until Zeno managed to recover the throne the following year. Shortly afterward, Zeno received a delegation from Odoacer that brought the imperial insignia to Constantinople. The message was clear: no more emperors were needed in the west. Thus, in practice, the end of direct imperial rule in the western part of the empire was announced. This moment is often considered the fall of the Roman Empire. However, in reality, its eastern half continued to exist. Later, it would become known as the Byzantine Empire, a name that comes from the ancient Greek colony of Byzantium, upon which Constantinople was built. The inhabitants of this state continued to consider themselves Romans, and they called their country the Roman Empire, or Romania, a term that appeared already in the 4th century after Christ. The Greek cultural influence in the eastern provinces often gives the impression that this was a completely different state from the classical Roman Empire. Many contrast the Greek language and culture with the traditionally Latin character of ancient Rome. However, it is important to remember that the eastern provinces of the empire had long been a center of Greek language and culture. The Romans inherited a region that was already deeply Hellenized. For that reason, the Greek character of the East existed even during Roman rule itself. Over time, these Greek characteristics became even more visible when the East became the only center of Roman power. Even so, the empire continued to preserve its form and institutions from late antiquity. To be Roman no longer necessarily meant speaking Latin or coming from Italy. Roman identity had become a political belonging to which people of diverse origins could adhere. For that reason, the inhabitants of the Eastern Roman Empire, although they often spoke Greek and had different cultural roots, continued to see themselves as Romans, citizens of the same empire that had once emerged as a small community in Italy. This was still the Roman Empire, not simply a medieval successor state. So the question arises: how did the eastern half of Rome manage to survive when the western half collapsed? During the 5th century after Christ, the Western Roman Empire was constantly shaken by civil wars and internal struggles for power. The Eastern Empire, in comparison, remained relatively stable. Even during the reign of Zeno, when internal conflicts were not lacking, the state managed to maintain its integrity. In the year 479, for example, the general Marcian led a coup in Constantinople itself. The rebellion nearly caused the death of Zeno. The emperor was saved only when another loyal general intervened with his troops and managed to convince a large part of the rebels to change sides. Marcian was captured, and the rebellion was suppressed. Another serious problem for the empire was the Ostrogoths. They were descendants of the Goths who had not followed Alaric into the Western Empire at the beginning of the 5th century. Instead, they remained settled in the eastern provinces. Some of them had previously served in the army of Attila, and after the fall of the Hunnic Empire, they were settled in Pannonia. In exchange for their military service, they received regular payments from the empire. The Ostrogoths who settled in Thrace gradually became Romanized and became closely connected with imperial politics. However, the Ostrogoths themselves were not completely united. During the reign of Zeno, two powerful leaders emerged who competed with each other. One of them was Theodoric Strabo, an ambitious military commander who helped Zeno recover Constantinople, but soon became difficult to control. The other was the young king Theodoric, who ruled another group of Ostrogoths. The emperor skillfully tried to balance both of them and even set them against each other. In the year 481, Theodoric Strabo died in an accident while riding. After the struggle for power among his followers, most of them supported the young king Theodoric. For several years, Zeno maintained complex negotiations with him. Finally, in the year 488, an agreement was reached. At that moment, Italy was still ruled by Odoacer. Zeno had recognized his authority as long as he formally recognized Julius Nepos as the legitimate emperor. In practice, however, Italy remained under the control of the Germanic ruler. For this reason, Theodoric decided to invade it. With the approval of Zeno, he received the titles of Patrician and Magister Militum and marched toward Italy. After defeating the Gepids along the way, in the year 489, he invaded Italy and gradually began defeating the forces of Odoacer. The campaign lasted several years. Eventually, Italy and the island of Sicily came under the control of the Ostrogoths. Odoacer was executed after surrendering. At first glance, the Ostrogothic kingdom of Theodoric appeared almost Roman. The old administrative structures were maintained, and Italy continued to preserve its Roman character. At first, the relations between Theodoric and the new emperor Anastasius were good. Anastasius even confirmed the titles that Zeno had granted to the Gothic king. Theodoric even came to describe his kingdom as an image of the empire itself. However, over time his power strengthened and relations with Constantinople began to deteriorate. Despite the Roman character of his rule, the Ostrogothic kingdom remained a foreign power governing territory that had once been imperial. The reign of Anastasius. After the death of Zeno, the new emperor Anastasius faced internal conflicts from the beginning of his rule. He came to power in the year 491 with the support of the Empress Ariadne, the widow of Zeno. This decision nearly provoked a civil war, because Anastasius was deeply unpopular in Zeno's native region of Isauria. Fortunately for the new emperor, most of the empire supported him. Even so, the Isaurians resisted for several years before finally being defeated in the year 497. After this, the government of Anastasius proved far more stable than that of his predecessor. He proved to be a capable ruler and undertook reforms in the administrative system, in addition to trying to reduce religious conflicts between the different Christian communities. Anastasius eased the tax system, reduced unnecessary expenses, and even sold part of Zeno's personal belongings to increase the state treasury. He also eliminated an extremely unpopular tax that affected the poorest people. He also reorganized the monetary system of the empire and introduced new gold denominations that became the basis of the currency for centuries. During his reign, the imperial treasury accumulated an enormous reserve of gold. But external threats did not disappear. In the year 502, the Persian king Kavadh asked the Romans for financial assistance to defend the Caucasus. When Anastasius refused, the Persians invaded Roman Armenia. At first, they achieved significant advances, capturing the cities of Theodosiopolis and Amida and threatening Asia Minor. However, the Romans quickly reorganized and managed to recover part of the lost territories. After several years of intense campaigns, the war ended with a truce, and both empires returned to their traditional borders. Later, the Romans built a new fortress at Dara, which would become a strategic base for future conflicts with Persia. At the same time, the Ostrogoths tried to expand their power toward Pannonia. This caused new tensions with Rome, but in the year 510, a peace treaty was signed that recognized the rule of Theodoric over the western part of Pannonia. This was the last major external conflict during the reign of Anastasius. The emperor died in the year 518. Conclusion: the Eastern Roman Empire had not suffered the same number of devastating civil wars that had shaken the Western Empire during the 5th century. In addition, after the fall of the West, it benefited from two capable rulers, Zeno and Anastasius. Their rule gave the empire the necessary time to stabilize and respond to internal and external threats. Especially important were the economic reforms of Anastasius, which left his successors with a stable and well-financed state. Thus, the Roman Empire continued to exist and remained a great power. But the 6th century would bring new and great challenges that the empire would still have to face.